I am trying to make an actual TV show.
It's so hard to find a funny show that isn't filthy. I watch them, but I don't want to.
Let's do this.
Fire, like lots of fire.
So dedicated.
So cool. Where's it go from there, you know?
Oh, have I got your attention now?
This is bigger than you can handle.
You got any plans for tonight?
What are you waiting for? Let's go.
Cool? Absolutely!
Welcome, Saloni.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Wasn't that freaking amazing? Thank you so much for being here. I'm Saloni. I work at the AV Club, as Claire said. And I freaking love the show, so I'm excited that I get to talk to two people who are so freaking critical to it. So please raise your hands for Chris Sheridan, series creator, and Sarah Tomko, who plays Akhtar 12 Trees.
Thank you. Wow. Hi.
That was one hell of a premiere, right? That was so good. I also just want to say Resident Alien just wrapped its third season. All three are now streaming on Peacock, which is a gentle reminder. And 2 seasons also on Netflix. So if you haven't somehow seen it, you have to. And since this episode is so fresh in everyone's mind, I wanted to start by asking you, Chris, when you what your vision was for season 3, and especially like with the world building and character developments, relationships, when you started working on season 3, what were some things you wanted to achieve for the show?
It's a good question. The first thing we do when we go into a new season is try to follow Harry's track throughout. And once we lay that down and figure what that is, it helps us create a theme for the season, and we can attach the other characters to it. In this one, with Harry's development going further, we look at it as like the first season was he was sort of born into this world, and he's learning how to walk and talk. And second season, he was more of a toddler, and by the third season, it feels like he's in like teen years, and it was the very first idea was he should fall in love for the first time, and have a girlfriend, and go through, all the stuff that entails for a 14-year-old, which is basically his developmental age. So we knew that he would find a girl, fall in love, break up, be absolutely crushed, and then find a way to crawl out of that pain like you do the first time you fall in love. Because that's a huge, for me anyways, it was the first huge growth in my emotional development was being devastated, getting over it and realizing, oh, that feeling's not forever. Like I can find a way to get past the hard times. So we wanted to put Harry through that. And then we sort of went from there with the other characters.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, as we saw in this episode too, that I want to talk to both of you about that final scene, because it is just so moving, and yet there's this like delicate humor in it because of their interaction. What was it like to film that? Because to me as a viewer, it felt like Asta found a new way to empathize with Harry in that moment. For you, what's it like to find these new layers to this character you've played for 2 seasons, and you're still like finding out new things about her, finding out new ways to play her? What's it like to come back for season 3 and have these discoveries about her?
Chris and I had a pretty big discussion before season 3 about how annoyed Asta was with Harry for like the first 2 seasons, and maybe how she should maybe lighten up on him. Mainly because of what you mentioned, how he's like a toddler and he's like constantly like breaking things or blowing people up. So she's like following him around those first 2 seasons, like, please don't do anything bad. So the empathy is something that was new for her. And we did talk about how because Darcy comes in now knows, and now Darcy's the one who's annoyed, Asta can kind of sit back and go, it's just what he does, don't worry. He tries to kill people, he won't do it, So that was a really fun, lighthearted way to play her most of the season. But it was definitely different for me because I I feel like the show was so different in season 1. Even Alan and I were talking about that recently, about how dark it was. I mean, he came to me at a fest recently and was like, "You were abused and I pulled a man through a wall. What were we doing?" You know? But he's also, in this season, getting to really explore his emotions in a way that he didn't get to in season 1, because he's so much more alien then, and now he's so much more human. And I'm so much more used to him now. So it's a really lovely balance, I think, for this season.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, like you said, you guys had this conversation before season 3. Can you talk a little bit about your collaboration process together when you have ideas for where Asta's trajectory can go, especially with Jay, or this new kind of like hurdle in her friendship with Darcy? And then do you have ideas for her? Do you want things to happen for her? And then how do you guys collaborate on that?
Yeah, I talk to all the actors before the season starts, and we in the writers' room have an idea for all the character arcs. And when we figure out the character arcs for everybody, I'll sit down with all the actors and say, "Here's what we have planned. How do you feel about that?" And they'll have ideas and they'll have thoughts, and we talk through it, and to the point where they're comfortable with what they're doing, and we continue that process even when we start shooting. There's times they'll get a script, and something might not feel right to them. We need to talk it through. A big thing was we wanted to pit Asta and Darcy together because a couple reasons. One is Asta spent so long having to lie to Darcy, and Darcy found out the truth, but she didn't find out from Asta. Asta never was honest with her, and Darcy as a character would hold on to that inside until it comes out in different ways. And now that they're living together, it made sense that there'd be underneath it all a little bit of resentment, like friends have and friends who've been friends for 30 years have. So we thought it would be a great movement for them emotionally in the season to have it out, and kind of go at each other for all their faults and everything. So when we built that in, we talked about it, and then we sent the script out, and then Sara and Alice had ideas on it. We sat down, myself and Nastaran, who had written the script, and Nastaran Dibai was one of our writers and directors. And we talked it through and made some adjustments, and Nastaran directed that episode, and I think Alice and Sara were fantastic in that scene. So, yeah, we talked throughout the whole process.
Yeah, I think in the beginning, one of the first things we did before we shot the pilot was talked about the variation of heartbreak and vulnerability versus Harry's comedy, And I feel like we were able to really kind of talk about what balance we needed to have in that season, and every season, how that changed, how that progressed, how that evolved. And then he's really wonderful about, granted, we try to give him a heads up, but he's like, if you could just let me know before the day, like when we're on set, we have a few people who are just like, can I just change this line? And he loves that.
It's been a growing. Season 1, it was
a lot
some
more.
Actors,
we had to get
one in
a
particular.
talking to.
You'd write the script, and they'd come in, and you'd start watching them perform the scene, and it's like, that actor's not saying anything that's in the script. I don't know what. I thought I'd try something. It's like, let's just try to get this.
That's what happens when you work with a bunch of comedians,
Yes.
So I was coming in as the straight man, just being like, I know my lines, like I have nothing else to do but know my lines, But it was nice when there would be moments where I'd be like, I don't think she'd say that, and it was nice to be able to have that.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then we have to talk about Alan, because
We have to.
What a comedy legend.
Yes.
I often wonder while watching, because he does so much physical comedy, and like his face is basically like elastic. I often wonder while watching, how are you guys not breaking? You probably are, but like, what's it like to be on set with him, watch him do all of that, and I guess compose yourself and be so good? And just what's the comedy stuff like to work with him on? Because I don't know, he's just such a legend, and I'm dying to hear just like on-set experience with him.
Yeah. During the pilot, I think I was so terrified of getting to work with him, and not because he's terrifying. He's so kind. But it was my first time being a series regular, so I really just wanted to show up and know my lines, as I told you, and do my job and let him, and just be there for him and support him, and ultimately be reactionary. And he's so fresh. He's got a different take almost every take. I barely get through most of the takes. But by the time I got to season 2, I was pretty used to his humor, so I was able to keep my shit together. But in season 3, there's an episode, 305, I think, when you get to meet the love of his life, the Bluebird. They did a dinner scene. I don't know if you've seen it, or if you haven't yet, please watch it on Peacock. It's so good that I could not stop laughing
I
through
had
the
tears in my
entire
eyes.
time. And I'm surprised they got takes of us with straight faces.
Yeah, there was a kiss between Harry and Heather, played by Edie Patterson, who's incredible, and it was funny anyway. But then also in editing, I strung together all the best takes of it, and it just went on way longer than it should have probably.
There's got to be like behind the scenes footage of that.
Oh, there's a lot.
So many takes we didn't use.
There was a take of that. I mean, they were doing so many things. One of them, Edie pushed Alan backwards onto the table and got a mouthful of bird seeds and started spitting them into his mouth. And even she started laughing at that. Like it was really funny. And then, so yeah, Sara and Alice had a hard time. A lot of the shots were sort of behind Sara and Alice, looking through to Harry and to Alan and Edie. And there were
I think there's a shot where
definitely
like
times
my
where
shoulders
her shoulders are laughing. But there was the other one that I remember is in episode 8. There's a piece we did where off camera, Harry and the Bridget, his son, the baby alien, were off camera like ripping apart some gray aliens, and we're doing reaction shots of Sara and Alice and stuff looking. And they're like supposed to be horrified about what they're hearing because
it's
like
a
ripping
shot of
sounds
me
and everything.
reacting to him, and he's saying the most absurd,
and then
obscene things.
we had stuff scripted, but then he went on and just started doing his own. And one of the things that he improv, which I put in the script, was I'm going to stick my hand up your ass and puppet you like you're on public television. And talking to like a gray that he's beating up. And Sara just started laughing her ass off.
I was like, damn it, Alan, what the heck?
And then the other one he said, which is sort of in there, but we lowered it down, was, are these eggs? Oh, this one's pregnant.
Oh, God.
And Sara started laughing again. So I think sometimes he sort of does it on purpose to try to get people to laugh.
I think the lesson is we need to see like a blooper reel. We
Yeah,
need
there
to
is.
see behind the scenes footage. And I mean, talking about the comedy of the show too, a lot of it comes from Harry's observations of humanity and how ridiculous our day-to-day existence actually is. Where do you get like inspirations for some of the very specific jokes he makes about anything that he sees? Because he can turn everything into just like a lesson, but not even realize he's doing it. How do you find the comedy in that?
Yeah, those pieces are hard, and I find that the studio network, when we're done the scripts, like they often reach out and say, "Hey, can we get more of that stuff you're talking about?" And it is hard to come up with, and there's definitely been some good observational stuff from him. Like even in the pilot, I loved when he was commenting about he was drunk after going to the bar with Asta, and he's hammered on this whiskey, and he decides in his drunken state to go to this house where this little boy lives and just go kill him because the kid can see. And then he says something like, alcohol, what is it? Alcohol makes me make really smart decisions or something. Right. And then the next day when he was hungover, he said how dehydrated and everything he was, and he's got a headache, and humans must not react to alcohol this way or they would never drink it. So those types of things I think are really funny and so relatable, but they're very hard to come up with. But they're fun when you come up with a good one, yeah.
And similarly, obviously, like Harry thinks Asta is the peak of humanity. He knows evil exists, but he also looks at Asta and he's like, "This is what we can be," which is just someone good and kind and flawed but relatable. And I wonder for you, does that weigh on you like at all when you're playing her? Like this is kind of a weird burden to have that you didn't even ask for. And is it also cool to play someone like that?
Yeah, no, it is both. There was a really beautiful scene in season 2 where I talked to him about pain and emotions and how it's important that we have them. And there was also a great scene at the diner where I explain what I think happens with death and what life really means. And I think I've had these wonderful moments written by Chris that have been so beautiful to be able to explain to a non-human what my perspective is. And it has been really cool to be able to represent what is sort of like you and me. Like I am you and you are I guess. And then the alien is the one that is the weirdo. But then when you're seeing us in Patience, so many of us are weird that he ends up being normal in a lot of scenes, you know, and we're the ones that are going through the lessons and he's the one giving us the lessons. So it's been a really wonderful balance and a mixture, being able to play her. But I haven't felt the pressure, and I don't think Asta really thinks about it in that sense because it's all happening too fast, except for that one moment right at the end of season 1 when he's like, everything's going to blow up in 30 seconds, so I got to go. And she's like, go, yes, please go. You know, in that time, in that moment, it's like, it's always so at the last second, you know. So she doesn't really have time to think about the pressure of it, but it's, you know, it's good.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we can all agree that the show is such a beautiful mix of being so silly and funny and goofy, but yet being so meaningful and has something significant to say, which is, you know, can be summed up in one word, which is wholesome. And I'm curious what you both think about having a show like Resident Alien on TV and like the importance of that, why it's easy for people to connect with, especially because it's such a busy TV landscape. But I do think that Resident Alien is just comforting and funny. And what do you guys think about having a show like that versus everything else on TV right now?
I think it's important. I mean, when I first developed the show off this is the great comics by Peter Hogan and Steve Parkhouse, there was a lot of, this is 2016 when I pitched it. There was a lot of great TV on, a lot of new shows. The cable was exploding. Handmaid's Tale had come on, was incredible. And there's so many great television shows on, but there's a lot of darkness in them. And one of the things that I wanted to do in this show was do a show about humanity, do a show about the connections between, you know, people on Earth and all this stuff. But I really wanted to have a hopeful feeling. I wanted people to watch it and feel afterwards that there is hope to be had, you know, living as a human these days. And it is, you know, it feels like it's more and more hard to find in our daily life. So I definitely, you know, and in a show where, you know, there's an alien trying to kill a kid, you know, you would think it's not as hopeful as it ends up being. But I definitely wanted, by the end of the episodes, or most of the episodes, for people to feel better about their lives. And in the same way that Harry's on this trajectory of coming in, feeling like there's no hope for humans, and slowly, you know, character by character, realizing, oh, maybe there is hope. Maybe humans do have what it takes to love each other and accept each other, even if they're different. That as Harry goes through this, the audience is feeling the same thing. So that was always a goal from the beginning. And, you know, we got really lucky in casting. These people are incredible. Not only are they funny, but they're so grounded and real. It makes it easy for the audience to relate to them, which also pulls them into the world. And I think there's just a lot of relatable themes in the show that people enjoy and can see themselves in.
I think also for a sci-fi show, it wasn't so sci-fi that it was too scary or weird for people who weren't into sci-fi. I think it was a really nice blend in the beginning to say, hey, if you've never tried a sci-fi show, check us out. And I think we've dived a little bit more into the sci-fi content in season 3, which I love. But it's been a nice way to invite people in who've never seen it before. I mean, before I booked it, I wasn't like a huge sci-fi person. I'd been on the Sci-Fi Channel with like films, and I'd seen a few things like Star Wars or whatever, you know. But so I get it. I understood that people weren't always into that kind of storytelling, but I think it's pretty cool when you can have such an amazing story and it can be so relatable. And we've had so many fans who have had so many different experiences about feeling isolated, whether it was based on culture or their, you know, sexuality or whatever they were going through, that they've reached out to Alan and reached out to a few of us and said, like, this really made me feel seen. Because as an alien, he's representing most of us. You know, and I love that about Asta too, is that she feels like another and he feels like another. So it's a love fest of otherness.
I love that. And
Yeah.
I mean, as we said, like it's the perfect mix of comedy and being heartfelt. What's it like to strike that balance narratively for you when you're producing? Do you, and when you're creating, coming up with ideas, or even just like dialogue? Do you have like, I need to be 50% this and 50% that, and then how do you bring it out in your performance?
We don't go by percentages, but there is a feel to it. You know, in every story, we want to have moments that are funny. So you look at scenes, and there's certain scenes that feel like they could be funny. You try to find the comic conceit in the scene to add humor. In the episode we just saw, there's a scene where Liv has to tell Mike all this information that she found in the journal. It's a pretty dull scene because there's a lot of exposition, so we try to come up with a way to make it funny, which is they go in front of the speaker and he can't hear what she's saying. So you do try to add that stuff, especially in a case story-wise where there's a lot of information to be spit out. And also, if it's a lighter scene, they're talking to Asta about dating, there can be comedy in that, but we definitely look for moments where the audience can really feel something, because it's always been the case on this show, and we always felt it from the beginning, that it's such a great way to pull people into the show and get them to really love these characters, is to have them feel for the characters. In season 2, there's that great moment that we built up to where Sheriff Mike finally opens up to Deputy Liv about his partner who had passed away, and it was such a beautiful scene that Corey performed so well, but it's a hard one to watch without tearing up because Corey's such a great actor, and a lot of those feelings were really coming from his life. I had talked to him ahead of time about experiences he's had with loss, and we worked it into the script. So we definitely are aware of the comedy and the emotional impact of it and try to find a balance of both in each.
And I think when we're filming, we do talk about that as well. Like, let's go for one that's lighter. Let's go, we have a way that we communicate on set, but sometimes we factor that in. But yeah, not necessarily in a percentage realm, but yeah.
Well, I have so many more questions, but I want to make sure that the audience gets to ask. So if anyone has any questions. There you go.
So many successful shows are successful because they portray a sense of community. And something I find really interesting about Resident Alien is it doesn't have one community, like a lot of shows have. It has all these different communities that are being represented by all the different characters. And I'm wondering if that was a very conscious effort to make more than just a single community.
It was. Are you referring to like the indigenous community in the area and everything? It was conscious from the moment we started. The comic has indigenous characters in it, and I knew that going into the show, not only did we want to do, have indigenous characters and indigenous world as part of this, but also do it as authentically as possible. So I hired Native American writers and Native American actors, and I try to use a lot of indigenous artists in the music, and it was the way to make the show feel authentic, because that's what the real world is. And the other thing we tried to do is cast Native American actors into roles that don't need to be indigenous actors. In episode 3, we meet this guy John, who Darcy works with up in Avalanche Control, who we later reveal is Liv's husband. And that you could have cast anyone for that, but we purposely cast a Native actor, Trevor Carroll, who's fantastic, and didn't point out the fact that he's indigenous. He just is a person in the world. Right. And so we tried to make all of that as authentic as possible to these real regions in the U.S. that have a Native population. So yeah, it's all part of the same community, and it's one of the themes of the show is that you have these communities that do feel separate, but they're not really separate. We're all part of the same group. And I think one of the things that Harry's learning that we want the audience to learn is not to look at other people as others or as outsiders, but we're all part of the same. We're all the same. We're all connected.
There's also our little communities of the cast. I'm with you there. It's not just it's all of us collectively together in Patience, Colorado, but then Levi and Maren and Ben all play Max and Judah and Kate and not Judah, Max, and I get all their names mixed up, but you know what I mean. It's that little unit, and then Liv and Corey and me and Darcy, and we have our own stories, but then all together, like that birthday dinner scene in season 2, which is so great. So.
And it's trying to expand that world too. I mean, it does. It feels Patience feels like a real place because I think we've done a pretty good job, not having it just be our 7 characters. We add, we have Judy, we have all these other external characters who sort of come in, who are a part of our world now, and it just feels filled out. Yeah. And that was done by design because I wanted Harry, when he comes down, to have something real to react off of. So we tried really hard to make all the characters as three-dimensional as possible.
I saw another hand raised.
I was just curious. I grew up in Colorado. Now work for the state of Colorado. And the town reminds me of Durango, Colorado. Is that where this is based out of?
It is generally based on small town Colorado. I mean, I liked the comic was set in Washington State, but I wanted to shift it to Colorado because I loved the thought of this group of people kind of isolated in this little town that you know that when it snows too much you can't leave. They're surrounded by mountains. The real, if there was one town to me that was the one I was thinking of when I created it, was Crested Butte, which a friend of mine had lived at for years, and I went and visited, and it felt, I liked the feeling of that. It's not easy to get to, and I like the feeling that you can get snowed in, and then everyone's stuck. It's like characters being stuck on an island together and being forced to sort of deal with each other. I like the sense of that. Crested Butte is the one, and loosely based. There was a mining stuff there as well, and so that was the original sort of inspiration of moving into Colorado. But it's very similar to a lot of Colorado towns, and our establishing shots a lot of them are stock shots of like Telluride and some other towns as well. So there's a lot of a look of a lot of these small old Colorado mining towns.
Does anyone else have a question? There you go. Go for it.
First of all, I love the show. I love how heartwarming it is and how it's so life affirming. And I've been tracking it through the seasons and from the comics. So great job. I was wondering, I'm a director, and if you could speak a little bit more about the visual effects and maybe the prosthetics and how all of that factors into the day and into your process.
It's a great question. It makes the day a lot harder, especially on our show where we have this gimmick where Max can see the alien. And that makes it tough because, and you saw it in that episode, every time Max is in a scene with Harry, especially if someone else is in the scene, we have to do the scene twice. We've got to shoot it with Harry in the mask, and we have to shoot it with Harry not in the mask. And it takes Alan 3 hours to get into the mask. So sometimes it's on different days, but that adds a whole extra scene to the show. It makes it really difficult. The mask that Harry wears was brilliantly designed by a guy named Bill Terzakis. Rest in peace. He passed away after our season 1. But he designed it in a way where the silicone, or whatever, I think it's silicone, is very, very thin from the nose down. So all the mouth movements are actually his mouth. So you get a lot of expression down here. But from here up is all solid. So all of the eye movement, all the brow movement, the blinking is all like 2D enhancement that our visual effects team at COSA does. So the bottom part of it is all Alan, and the upper part of it is our visual effects team.
They're trying to match his expression. It's
try to match his expression in the show.
And they do such a great job.
Yeah.
Of when he's blinking and, also when he's upset or his eyebrows.
Yeah, it's very expensive to do. So you have to limit it a little bit. We had an issue this year with the baby. So the baby alien, we have a couple foam dolls that we can use when Harry's holding it or whatever. And then we have puppet people who are like have a fishing line on the tail, like moving the tail around, because it's really expensive. It's like to just have the baby have an expression on its face, and the baby is all enhancement. None of it is practical except for certain takes when the baby is either on his shoulder or holding. We have one baby that is an actual puppet, so we have people moving the mouth and moving the eyes and everything. So it's all a mixture of both those, and it's really based on cost, like which makes the most sense in any one of those shots. But it adds up. I mean, it's a few grand per shot if you're having the baby blink or anything. So you have to pick your moments, and then more expensive, obviously, you have the baby running along the ground. So that stuff's hard. I mean, some of those things when you're from a directing standpoint, in episode, I think 13 of season 2. George Takei voiced a gray alien that Harry sees on the street at night. And that performance was Alan and a C-stand with a tennis ball on top about the height of the alien. Right. And he performed it, and I threw some things at him. We hadn't cast George Takei yet, but I threw some things to him that we were going to try to have George Takei or whoever voiced it say, some comedy things. And so he was sort of performing against nothing. And then we ended up getting George Takei to come in, and I gave him all these lines, and he was so funny. Like we had the scripted lines, and then there was some line about how he's freezing his gray dick off, and he was laughing and having so much fun. But there was also a series of moves when he was trying to, the alien was trying to just, I think, say what Harry's people's name is or something like that. And instead of just the voice weird things, he's doing all these movements and turning around and waving his arms and stuff. And that was all, I had to stand in front of a video camera and perform it all and then send it to our visual effects team, who then animated it that way. And
I want that video.
yeah, there's a lot of videos that I'm not proud of.
Oh my God,
There was
that
a video
needs to be on some blooper.
in season 2 when there was a scene where Harry as an alien was learning how to be a human by this dog that he met when he was coming to patients. And there's a scene where he's humping a vending machine to get like food out of it. And I literally, at 2 a.m. On set, Brian was there, Brian Fisher, our visual effects supervisor. I was trying to explain to him that the hump had to be a certain way because it's funnier in a certain way. And he couldn't understand what I was talking about, so I sort of off to the side as the crew was putting stuff together, I had the camera stand, and I was
You were humping the stand?
I humped the camera table.
Wow, I'm so proud of you.
That's on film somewhere.
Wow.
So it's all the stuff helps the show and all the visual effects, but it's a challenge, and you have to figure out a way to shoot it all, and it takes more time too.
Awesome. Does anyone have a question? And go for it.
Just curious, because Alan's delivery and intonations are slightly different in the pilot versus once the series gets going. And I'm curious about that decision. Was that purely comedy? Did it come from Alan? Just curious about that.
Alan is so thoughtful about everything he plays and every move he makes. There's no mistakes. Everything is completely planned out. I think I had a general sense in my head that the alien probably, the more it learned how to talk, probably changed a little bit, but I hadn't really thought it through. But Alan had thought it through, and he's done that for 3 years now. He thought more into it than I ever did. I mean, when in the pilot in the start, he literally, and he's talked about it, he's trying to form the words. His mouth isn't used to forming words yet. And so he has a harder time talking because his mouth doesn't work yet. And he had that thought going in, and he used that in the first season. So as the seasons have gone along, he's expertly been able to go through the path of learning, even with vocal structure and, certainly his emotional movement. And, he's more relaxed now. He's less dark because he's less alien. He's a little more human. He's learning comedy, so he's trying jokes now. But the vocal stuff that he did is brilliant to me, and I'm glad you picked up on it. It is way different, but it's not a case of how it sometimes happens with shows, like things just change. It was all very, very deliberate from Alan's part. He's a character learning how to talk.
I even remember in season 1, there were times he wanted to get emotional, and the three of us would talk about, is it time for him to do that yet? And so I think in season 1, you'll see a lot of Alan really trying to figure out how much he's allowed to be figuring it out and how much he's still just figuring it out in the moment. So by the time you get to season 2, I think he leaned into a certain way of doing, and now season 3 is just wackadoo. Like it's as if he's just the craziest human, and he's not even alien, and he's just a weirdo, which we love. But like season 1, it's a good pickup because he was very calculated about all that, and he worked with a vocal coach too. He thought the intonation would be a sign of intelligence. Why do humans slur and slang and all those things?
The first time he was in bed, this was him too. First time he was lying in his bed, he had the covers up, and he had his holding it with his 3 fingers. That was all him. I hadn't thought of it because the alien has like 3 fingers, so he just used 3 fingers to hold the sheets up. And I thought that was the most brilliant thing I'd ever seen. He'll come up with that stuff all the time. Even in the pilot, there's a moment when Asta and Harry are in the 59 drinking. There's a moment, and it's so subtle, but Asta grabs her beer and sips it, and he watches her do it. She sips it and sort of smiles. He watches her do it and then grabs his beer, sips it, and sort of smiles. And you'd miss it if you're not really watching for it. but it's
Yeah, you
it's
see him do that a
so-
lot in season
yeah.
1, little Easter eggs of him watching people and then doing what they do.
And there's a bit in season 3. I know we're probably running long, but there's a bit in season 3 when he asks episode 4, I think. Harry asks Heather out, the blue avian, when they're in human form in the diner, and she says, "No, I'm only here for a few." And he pretends like he's okay, but he's clearly crushed. There's a take, and when I was putting it together and editing, there was a take, and it was about 5 times watching it before I realized it. There's a take where he's sort of smiling and just sort of reacting. But if you look really closely, he's subtly mouthing, "I hate you." And when I noticed that, I'm like, oh my God, that's the funniest thing I've ever seen. And so I put that cut in. And it looks like he's just smiling, but if you look really close, he's like, "Oh, I hate you." Oh, it's so good. He comes up with this stuff all the time.
He does that a lot. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much. Those were really thoughtful questions. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for being here. I hope you guys had a fun time. This was amazing for me. I loved the show. It was an honor to talk to both of you about it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thanks
Appreciate
for
it.
watching, everyone. We appreciate you.
Thank you.